Welcome back to the Mental Playbook podcast. I'm here with Kasey Kazliner, who has an incredibly wide range of experience in sports, and I'm mostly talking about behind the scenes in sports media. Hi, Kasey, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. So, I want to know what first sparked your interest in sports journalism and broadcasting.
Yeah, it's a good question. So during COVID, I was like a sophomore in high school during 2020 and huge sports fan my whole life. I've loved, Bay Area sports specifically because I'm from the area. And so I started a YouTube channel just like talking about my favorite teams. Did not really expect it to go anywhere or lead into anything. I actually didn't really want to go into broadcasting kind of as a career early on. And I just kind of fell in love with it. I'd made videos like every day. And all throughout high school, made 2,000 YouTube videos about these sports teams and eventually kind of developed a little bit of a following and realized maybe I could do this more than just for fun. And so that really led me to this passion. And I continued that obviously to college now and making content, but also like broadcasting actual sports games that are live. So really kind of that's the start.
Yeah, and have you always been behind the scenes, or did you also play sports?
Yeah, I played baseball and basketball mostly. I went to like a pretty small private school, so sports weren't huge. Like we didn't have a football team, so I couldn't like broadcast football to get let's start there or anything. But I did play, and that's kind of where I had that connection. It was like, obviously I feel like a lot of, broadcasters and people who work in sports kind of have that connection because they played it at some point. And so I really developed it that way, and I really enjoyed playing early on, but kind of realized, I don't really have a chance of going pro or anything or playing in college. So I really fell in love with the broadcasting aspect.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm curious to know if there's any like skills or anything you learned from playing sports that you apply to what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think like thriving under pressure is a huge part of it because I think when you're broadcasting, especially like for the first time or you're in front of a camera for the first time, a lot of people are just so nervous and stage fright is definitely a real thing. And sports is the same way. You're afraid you're gonna mess up or there's just so many thoughts going through your head when you have to act in the moment off reaction. And so I think that's certainly one thing I learned of like, you have to stay calm, stay collected and not, panic. I think that's where you can sometimes fall under pressure. And I think that really taught me kind of the trade of like, sitting down and at the end of the day, like if you make a mistake, it's probably going to be okay. Like obviously you don't want to do some things that could hurt you, but you want to be able to act in the moment and be really resilient when things get tough. And I think those both apply to sports and, working in broadcasting and production as well.
I want to come back to this topic, but first, growing up, was there any broadcasters or kind of role models that inspired you early on?
Yeah, Matt Vasgersian, who does MLB Network and the Angels, he went to high school with my mom, and I never really got in contact with him until recently. But I covered an Angels and A's game from the press box, and I met him for the first time. I said, like, my mom, and he was like, oh yeah, I remember your mom. And so he was a big one for me. He did all the MLB The Show video games, so his voice is very recognizable. So he was like a big one, a big inspiration for me. Also like with the Giants locally, Dave Fleming is, really big role model to me because I just love the way he broadcasts. And there's so many great local broadcasters. I'm probably leaving out many, but I think like listening to other people is a huge thing for me. Obviously, you don't want to copy other people, but if you can emulate sort of the same styles and same practices, that's something that I've really tried to do. And I think those two in particular have made me really, try to stand out more. And meeting, of course, Matt Vasgersian was huge. Like he was a big role model for me, and so it was an awesome moment.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That's awesome. So
Yeah.
now you're at USC, fight on. How did you get your start with Annenberg, and what was kind of your first big assignment?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of a funny story actually, because I mean, at USC, like in Annenberg and like even with the Daily Trojan as well with sports coverage, they're not gonna put you on like football or men's or women's basketball right away just because those are very popular teams to cover. And I got my start in like written journalism, which I still do a little bit of now, but I'm more, talking because that's just like my passion. But obviously, like with that in mind, knowing that I wasn't gonna do football or basketball right away, which are like the bigger sports. I wanted to get my foot in somewhere. So they said, we need someone to do women's volleyball. And so, I knew nothing about volleyball, honestly. Like I knew the rules and stuff, but I didn't really know anything about the team. And I kind of just took it and ran with it. And I ended up going and covering like most of the practices, most of the games, and you don't realize it before you do it. But it's such a great way. Sometimes with like these smaller sports, you don't realize, but such a great way to develop like relationships with coaches and like get to know the players and really kind of know what it feels like to get in a press box or a press booth and like have that simulation of what a pro game is like. And so doing that, I feel like really helped me and it helped me rise up the ranks within Annenberg because I feel like that gave me a lot of practice. And I think people respect when, maybe you take on a sport that like not a lot of people want to do. I think people understand that that's not an easy thing to do sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely unique. So you cover both the LA Kings and the Ducks, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so what's that like balancing coverage between like two rivals NHL teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. So interestingly enough, I actually do get like press box access every game for the Kings. And I don't with the Ducks. Also, I don't have a car at USC and Anaheim's pretty far. So that's another reason why. But I think like you have to remember that, when you're a sports journalist or a sports broadcaster, at the end of the day, like you're impartial. You can't be biased at all. And I grew up a big Sharks fan, like NHL wise. I'm a huge, Sharks fan, kind of undercover when I go to these things. But when you step into that press box or you're covering like two teams that are rivals, that all kind of goes away and you kind of have to put on your like unbiased cap. So it's definitely something that like took a little getting used to. But I think, when you understand that concept, it goes a long way that like you're not the fan anymore because obviously like it's hard to do when you're a child and you love these teams, but when you grow up it's kind of like a stepping stone. And so it's really been fun covering those teams. And obviously the Ducks have been a little less exciting to cover than the Kings, but I also do get access to the Kings and that's been really something I'm grateful for, so I really like doing that.
Yeah, that's a really cool experience. And then you're also writing for a weekly NHL column, The Silver Shield. How do you kind of decide what story or theme to kind of focus on?
Yeah. So Silver Shield is something I started my freshman year, and I don't do it as much anymore, but I still kind of tap into that. It's also a podcast sometimes we do. And the way I kind of did it was like I want to talk about every team because I feel like, at some point, like you want to be well versed in, the league, right? And so the way I used to do it is I would pick like three teams per week and, do a storyline on each, and then, there's 32 teams, so eventually that, 10 weeks in or 11 weeks in you'd have everyone covered. And so I think going for like those more pressing storylines, but also kind of like the interesting nuanced storylines that people don't necessarily know about, are really interesting and exciting to hear about. I mean, I covered the Coyotes moving to Utah pretty extensively. And again, like I'm really into like the sports business side as well. And stadiums has kind of been a big passion of mine learning about. And so that was cool to cover. And I think choosing storylines for that kind of fell on like what I was feeling that week.
Yeah, and yeah, so you're writing multiple articles a week. How do you keep your voice fresh and your perspective unique?
Yeah, I think like not necessarily following a formula is something I like doing because I think, there's certain ways you are supposed to like write stories or even like not even writing, like broadcasting. There's certain ways you're supposed to say things. And I think there's some good to like, stuff that comes out of that. But I think at the same time, you want to keep things original. And I think, in this sort of age of like, it sometimes feels like people are just kind of piggybacking off other people to get ideas. You want to kind of be like the standing out person that doesn't always do that. And so I think for me, whether it be, just covering one singular game or covering a bigger topic, I want to make it interesting for a reader or for a viewer or listener and not making it, just solely about, the stats. I think that can get kind of boring. Being nuanced and talking about parts of the game is something I kind of take pride in. So that's something I'm really excited about doing and want to keep doing even more.
Yeah. So then you said you're sports editor for the Daily Trojan. How do you support other student writers and help shape the sports section as a whole?
Yeah, so started out with just being a regular writer there and then became an assistant sports editor. And it's certainly one of those positions where it's a grind, like you're in the office for, 4 to 6 hours, sometimes, a day. It's a lot. But I think like supporting younger students is like a big part, and not just younger students, but like people that don't maybe have enough experience to be an editor yet, but want to get involved and help out the most they can is huge. Because I think like I had some really good mentors at USC that were able to help me when I needed it the most and kind of introduce me to people I want to meet and get me involved. And so I want to pay that forward to other people. And so I think like it's one of those positions that isn't like the prettiest of things. Like you're not, you know, getting paid, you're not doing things that like everyone wants to do per se, like being in an office for a while, but you're learning these really valuable skills that, a lot of people can use. And I think I've learned really a lot of skills that are going to translate not just to writing or editing, but things like broadcasting and enhancing my vocabulary. So it's been a fun ride for sure with the DT.
Yeah. And how did you get into play-by-play announcing? Can you first share what that is and then how you got into it?
Sure, yeah. So play-by-play announcing is like when you turn on a game and the voice you hear in the background describing everything that's happening. That's play-by-play. And the way I got started was really at USC, through KXSC Radio, which I'm now co-director of. I had a few, mentors that were the directors at the time when I was a freshman and gave me some opportunities because I showed interest and at first like wasn't very good and I wanted to get better. So Big Ten Network and Big Ten Plus get introduced to USC this past year. I get involved a lot with that. That helps you get better. It's one of those things that you really can only get better by doing it. Like you can't really, if you read a 2,000 page book on play-by-play broadcasting, you might get a little better, but there's no way you're going to be better than just simply going down and doing it. And so this summer, I'm broadcasting for a collegiate summer baseball team in my area. And that has given me the opportunity to call, at this point, 25 games. By the time the summer's over, I'll have 40 games done. And I mean, it's been a great thing. That's the career I ultimately want to pursue. And again, it's been a big ride because I couldn't really do that in high school. I didn't really go to a sports heavy school. They actually didn't allow us to broadcast the games because of a liability with filming students and stuff. So at USC, it's completely different. And I think with the radio and Big Ten Plus, I've had a platform to kind of share my voice. And I love play by play. It's a passion of mine. I love doing it. So I encourage people who want to get into it to, start practicing. And you don't even have to be at a game to do it. You can, find a recording and get practice that way. So it's really fun.
Yeah. So you are also a podcaster, and I think a huge difference for me that I see between podcasting and broadcasting is that you have time to prepare as a podcast host, whereas broadcasting, anything can happen. What are some of the biggest challenges of live broadcasting, and how do you handle those unexpected moments on air?
Yeah, like you said, it's very spontaneous. Like sports, anything can happen, not just like on the field, but injuries and like bad stuff can happen that you don't really know what to say at that moment. And I think I got some good guidance from, my mentors, but I think again, you never know what's going to happen. And so I think like always staying on your toes is a huge part of that. Like again, like watching the full game and being there to react is the bare minimum, but having the energy to go with that is sort of the supplementary thing that you have to bring in a positive moment where there's an unexpected play and the crowd's reacting. Like you have to be able to provide that energy because people are going to tell if you don't. But then, like you said, like in a maybe more spontaneous negative moment, like an injury, you have to be able to relate to the player and the fans and the viewers, right? Like there's a bunch of different variables involved, and you can't have the same energy. You can't be monotone the whole game. It's a wavelength of like I'm gonna bring my energy high when there's a home run, but a guy gets hurt, or a woman gets hurt, I'm gonna bring the energy down and keep it kind of level. You want to be relate to the people. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, and I think kind of what you said before, just practicing multiple times will definitely get better. Is there a piece of advice that a mentor has given you, especially in this sports media world?
Yeah, the biggest thing seriously is like have fun because I think like there's, a lot of times where I go into a game I'm calling and I overthink it and I'm so particular about everything I say and I don't really have fun. I kind of overthink it and I mess up maybe because of that or I get mad at myself when I'm, make a mistake. But I think going in with an attitude of like I'm seriously just talking about sports when it's all said and done. This is not life or death. This is not talking about politics. This is talking about sports. This is fun. This is like something everyone wants to do. And I think that advice I got from my mentor at KXSC, Jack Smith, who just won a huge award, has really gone a long way, and it clearly has worked for him. So I think applying it to my broadcasting is something I want to keep doing because I think like sure, like this is something that's a career, it's serious. But at the end of the day, like this is a game being played on the field or the court or the ice. And I want to be able to have fun and kind of ride with that instead of overthinking things and stumbling because of that. So that's been a big thing I've tried to work on.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you, how do you keep it engaging for your listeners? But I do also think when you're having fun, that's definitely fun for all the listeners and the fans there. So you also interned with USC football in the recruiting department. What was that experience like, and what did you learn from being behind the scenes of a D1 program?
Yeah, no, for sure. That was something I applied to like when I was in your position, entering the summer before my freshman year, and I was honestly just trying to get an opportunity anyway. And it was honestly kind of like looking back on it, it's one of those jobs where, like I said, with the editor position, it's a grind. It's not like the most fun position every single day, but you really do learn a lot, in hindsight, in retrospect because recruiting is such a mysterious thing for the outside world, especially in football with NIL and just how competitive it is. When you step into that position and you're like engaging with these recruits, you're trying to make their experience the best it can be on game day. That is where you really learn about the business side of sports and especially college football because, these are $1 million decisions now in the age of NIL, and these are guys that might play in the NFL. Like you want to make USC look good and be able to be an ambassador to these guys who are coming in. And so I think that position obviously like isn't broadcasting or isn't maybe something I necessarily want to go into, but I think it's something that really got my foot in the door with football, which is a sport that, obviously is very competitive to get into. And so I'm very happy I did it. And I think at the time I definitely appreciated it, but I think I appreciate even more now the opportunity to literally work in the LA Coliseum weekly. That was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then how do you approach covering teams when you're also a student and part of the USC community?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, obviously USC is a very academic school. It's a very social school, and then, obviously having sports on the side of that makes things kind of complicated. I mean, there's been a lot of times where I have to like miss friends' birthday parties and, miss hangouts because I'm doing, covering a game or I'm calling a game. And I think, when when it's all said and done, I kind of go with what my gut feeling is and what's going to impact the greater good. And I think for me, being a student, being someone who wants to have a good GPA and have good grades and also be social, balancing that kind of really puts a burden on your time management and like how are you able to lock in with all these different things. And so I think for me, like being on top of that has been big for me because I think early on when I first got to USC, I wasn't as good as that or at that because I, didn't expect what I was gonna take on. But I think now just having a routine is really important. And I think sleep is a big thing too. Like, I think I sort of take it for granted sometimes. Like, I go to bed pretty late when I'm calling a game, or I'm, at a Kings game that goes till, 11, 12, and then I have to do a podcast after. But I think when it's all said and done, like, managing your time with a spreadsheet, with a calendar, whatever it may be, it just goes such a long way. I think that like people don't always realize that. So that's been something I've been trying to get better at, and I think I have, but I'm still trying to improve.
Yeah, no, that's good. What trends or changes do you see happening in sports journalism, especially at the college level?
Yeah, I mean it's hard right now with how unpredictable the industry is, right? Like AI is certainly a thing, and I know like in the writing world that's a bigger concern maybe than the broadcasting world. But also in the broadcasting world, like regional sports networks are not as big as they used to be, and so jobs are decreasing. And so I think at the college level, I think thinking about your career, uh, it kind of forces you to be more versatile, whether you want to or don't want to, just because, we live in a world where, if you want to get hired for a job, you have to be doing, three, four, five different things, if not more, to stand out. And so I've kind of like that's a big reason why I do the things I do. It's, I do like doing them, but I also understand that I can't just be a broadcaster. I can't just be a writer. I have to be well-rounded and kind of have those things complement each other. And I think that's a big stepping stone for a lot of young people in the industry because, you can't always do multiple things at once. And some people just don't have the time, or maybe they're not at a school that gives them the opportunities to. But I think for me, like that has been the biggest thing in the ever-changing world that we're in of sports broadcasting, sports journalism. It's such a changing landscape right now. There's so many jobs that are changing and going away, unfortunately, and that's one thing we have to adapt to.
Yeah, and it's really cool because you're taking all these opportunities and just take learning different skills and traits that you can apply to any of your other roles. So I think that's really cool.
For sure, yeah. It's
What
been
are
great.
what are the biggest differences you see when covering like professional teams versus the college teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like there's certainly a different level of professionalism. Not that like college sports aren't professional by any means. I mean, college football games sometimes feel like pro games, from the press box or from the experience. But I think there's a certain, expectation of how you're going to act when you step in a press box, and I think those both apply to, pro teams and college teams. But I think at the pro level, like there's so many more things that go into the production and the PR side of things. And so I think, for me, I want to develop a good relationship with the PR team, whether it be college or pro. But I think at the pro level, the PR teams are a lot bigger, and these are people, again, like you don't want to have a bad relationship with because they pretty much control everything you're doing, and they give you access to players for interviews and et cetera, et cetera. So I really think at the pro level, like the sheer amount of people in the press box, and also the you're gonna meet some really cool people in the press box at pro games. Like I sat next to this entire King season, Dave Taylor, who I didn't, I knew who he was before, but he has his number retired in the rafters at Crypto.com Arena. And he was sitting next to me and we were talking pretty much the whole season. And so that was really cool to like have that kind of mentor on my side, and then other people in the Kings press box that offered me a lot of wisdom. And I think at the college level, you have that too, but you're kind of fending for yourself a little bit more as a college student. I mean, USC gets a lot of eyeballs in the media, but a smaller sport like, USC tennis or something like that might not get a lot. So you might be the only person at a game. And that's where you kind of have to be independent and put yourself out there to meet people and cover, a good team and a good story. So yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, that's really cool. What's a skill that you think every aspiring sports journalist or broadcaster should develop?
Yeah, I think the ability to like put yourself out of your comfort zone and ask questions is a huge thing. I think that's one thing in life that's really important, but I think in this industry, I've met people who go to games and never ask questions and, kind of just do their own thing, and that's totally fine. Like, if you want to go that route, that's the way you can do things. But I think for me and a lot of other people that I respect and have mentored me, when they go to games or they're calling a game, they're engaging with players, building relationships with others, asking tough questions but respectful questions, and getting their point across. That's really important to like really build your rapport because this industry is so built on connections and reputation. And again, like you can be in this industry and, skate by being kind of, casting yourself and a little bit more introverted, like that works. But I think to really maximize the whole experience and gain the tools you need to succeed, I think asking questions, being, a good listener and meeting people, especially and being nice and kind of like connecting and networking is huge in this industry.
Yeah, definitely. With all that you do you have any other hobbies or projects you're working on right now?
I'm a big music guy. I play a few different instruments, saxophone, piano, so I love music. And I think that helps me like focus. When I'm, in a bit of a stretch where I have 3 or 4 games in a week that I'm working on. So that's definitely something that I love doing. And I just love like the sort of aesthetic side of sports. Like you can see behind me, I have a lot of like memorabilia. So I love like collecting stuff like that. And I think that kind of ties into my passion of calling games and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, honestly, like the to be truthful with you, like sports for the longest time felt like a hobby. And so now, like for it to be kind of my job to work in this industry is like it still kind of feels like a hobby sometimes, even though it is more of like a commitment. But yeah, I mean, mostly those things and certainly trying to find some more things to dabble into.
Yeah. What's your favorite item up there?
It's a good question. I really like the Caleb Williams signed jersey. I, had the opportunity through USC football when worked in recruiting to meet him a few times, and he was really cool. And they were like, "Yeah, get a signed jersey, like go for it." It was not, something I really had to ask for, and he made it out to me, wrote my name on it. So having that framed on the wall is really cool.
Oh, that's awesome. So, finally looking ahead, I think you said you want to be a sports broadcaster.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, I mean, want to explore any other roles or you just kind of stick to broadcasting?
I think like there's multiple roles like within broadcasting I'd like to look at because like there's sideline reporting and I honestly haven't had a huge opportunity to do that. That I really like to explore as well. I think also like news anchoring for sports is something that I'm interested in as well. I've had a few mentors that I've met over the years that are really good sports anchors on their like local cable news channels and even like more national networks as well. And so I think that's something I'd be interested in. I think play-by-play is really difficult, and that's why I'm so interested in it, is because it really does present a challenge. And again, like not all this stuff comes easy, and I think play-by-play is a tough one. And so I think like getting that practice will allow me to apply that to other on-camera roles, other radio roles, maybe. Just because I feel like, there's so many different sports broadcasting roles, and there's kind of something for everyone. And I think for me, I want to figure out what that like totally is before I, like cut everything else down. So I definitely want to try everything.
Yeah. And you have like so many titles. You're like a writer, a host, editor, broadcaster, podcaster, all of that. When you were little, did you ever think you'd make it this far?
Honestly, no. Like I told you like a little bit, but I honestly like didn't want to be a broadcaster. I wanted to go pre-med. Like that was my sort of goal. I wanted to work in medicine, and I honestly, it took me a long time to realize like, is that really what I want to do, or like what sort of like sounds cool to do? And I kind of like the decision came where I was like, I really do like broadcasting. Being a public speaker. And so I did not expect it to get this far. I mean, even getting into USC felt like a big challenge for me. And I'm so grateful I got in because I think there's really no better place to do this. And so yeah, I mean, definitely looking back on these years and seeing sort of the trajectory I've been able to climb has been awesome. And definitely a lot of people I could thank for it. And I mean, there's been a lot of people at USC are just so willing to help you, which is great. And also just like, my parents and everybody that have helped me along the way. So I definitely look back like and think a lot like, wow, it's crazy that I have these opportunities. I'm able to go to 40 hockey games if I want to in a year. Like that's great. I love doing that and I couldn't appreciate it more, honestly.
Yeah, and I'm sure your younger self would be so proud. I mean, it's awesome with what you're doing, and congratulations on everything. And I'm excited to continue and follow you in your journey. My last question for you is what matters most to you, the destination, the journey, or the company?
It's a really good question. Um, I honestly like this might be sort of like the cliche answer, but I do think the journey is the most important just because these types of jobs like I'm doing right now, like working with the Walnut Creek Crawdads and the CCL, it's an unpaid job. It's 6 days a week and it's, 6 hours a day.
Wow.
And so it's not like a job that everyone has the ability to do because of financial reasons or can't or wants to do just because it's a lot, like unpaid, a lot of driving, a lot of preparation. And so that part of the journey, it's like I feel like it's sort of the like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger mentality of like it's going to take a long time before I or anyone else in my position is going to be able to, call games on a big network. But these smaller opportunities that, you can put on your resume and get a good reel out of, or, just meet people that can help you, or, you know, just make friends even too. I made a lot of friends like working in this job. It's not like the most appealing position just because, the commitment and the unpaid aspect. But I think, 15, 20 years from now, I'm going to look back on it and be like, wow, I'm so grateful and so happy I took that job just because, it got me to where I need to be. And I think at USC too, like, I mean, Annenberg and Daily Trojan, like Daily Trojan used to pay, they don't pay anymore. Like these are mostly unpaid things you're doing, and you're doing it because you want to not only better your career, but like meet people and be a part of the experience. And so I think the journey is important and getting there, and I think the destination is too. But knowing myself, I think like I'm never really satisfied with how I do. I always want to try to get better. So that journey is probably going to feel really long for me, and I can't wait to really see where it goes and just try to get better.
Yeah, and to me, that shows how much work and effort you're willing to put in because it's your passion, not because of the money or anything else. So I think that's really great and inspiring. Well, thank you so much, Kasey, for joining me on an episode of the Mental Playbook. To my listeners, mind strong, game on.